what we have here is a failure to imaginate. We have been institutionalized for so long, working 9 to 5, that we have lost ourselves. And if we want to rock retirement, we're going to have to discover what drives us. And that, my friends, is what we're going to do on today's Retirement Answer Man show. Welcome to the show. My name is Roger Whitney. I am your host. And if you've not been here before, you are in week 2 of a month-long series of discovering who are you in retirement. And last week we talked about why retirement isn't a short period but a long period, and why it's important to figure out this new role that you're going to play in retirement. And to do that, we need to reconnect with, well, sort of who we are, what drives us as a human, because we're all wired differently. And we're going to do that on today's show. But you know what? Yeah, we can't do anything until we have that all-important disclaimer. I don't know anything about your identity, who you are, so I would not deem to give you advice on the show, but I will share some wisdom of working with a lot of people just like you as helpful hints in education. But make sure you talk to people that do know you, your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before you make any decisions, because that's just common sense. So let's get on to the hot topic segment and talk about the low stakes network. So recently in an article in the New York Times, they highlighted a study on the importance of what they call low stakes casual friendships, your low stakes network. You know, we've talked before about you need to rebuild your social network. All your friends are at work. You need to have really deep friends, those calling, who can I call at 3 a.m. type of people. Yeah, those are important people. But according to this article, there was some studies that recently came out by sociologist Mark Granovetter talking about the importance of what he calls weak ties or a low-stake relationship. It could be with your barista, the grocery clerk, someone you see all the time at Starbucks. These low-stakes relationships, just casual people you see consistently that you're friendly with, but you don't really know them, but you're always very nice and how you doing, and you know a little bit about them. His research shows that these kind of relationships allow you to feel more connected, to have social attachments, just like you would need food, sleep, or safety. And you get those with your friends, but you can only have so many friends. And then it gets unmanageable. So these low-stake connections are really important. We'll have a link to the article in 6 Shot Saturday, which is our weekly email with quick tips on how to rock retirement. And if you're new here and you're not signed up for our weekly 6 Shot Saturday email, you can go to rogerwhitney.com, and there's a place there near the bottom where you can enter your name and email. We won't spam you, but we'll send you a summary of the show and some quick tips and links that we talk about. And I think about this, and I used to not be very good at this, but I love low-stakes relationships. When I had my office in downtown Fort Worth, let me think of my low-stakes relationships. Probably the biggest one was I always went to the same restaurant, Tavernia in downtown Fort Worth. If you're ever there, it's a great restaurant. And I got to the point where I knew the gentleman who owned it, not where we would sit there and talk. We never actually had a conversation then, hey, how you doing? And all those normal greetings. But it got to the point where I'd go to the restaurant. I would just simply walk in, just go right past the host or hostess, sit down, and they would bring me my Diet Coke, and then they would bring me my chopped salad with salmon on top. Without ever having to say a word, they know not to bring me a menu. They know exactly what I'm going to do. But everybody is friendly, and there were 2 or 3 waitresses that I don't even know their names, but we were friendly. One of them was living with friends and going to school part-time. The other one was getting ready to move to another part of the country. I think they probably already have. And we had a great relationship. And I would always tip fairly generously. But I enjoyed being sort of Norm in Cheers, where you walk in and everybody just knows you, but you really couldn't call them friends, right? I think of the bike shop, right? That's another good one. I'm trying to build stronger friendships with Jeff, the owner of the bike shop, but they know you. They recognize you. That feels comfortable. And according to this article in New York Times and the research of Dr. Granovetter, these things are important to us, maybe just as much, well, not from a comfort level or happiness level as those 3 a.m., the people I could call, those real deeper friendships. And it just feels good to have people know you. So sure, we got to build this bigger social network outside of work as we create this new identity, but don't forget the little things, that sense of community and people knowing you. Those things can go a long way in introductions, and you never know where they might lead. So it's a good article. We'll link to it in 6 Shot Saturday. With that, though, we want to get on with the meat of the subject, which is how do we reconnect with who our identity really is? So before we get to the main meat of the show, I want to just let you know that we're going to talk with Teresa McCloy, who is an expert on the Enneagram, a personality test. And last month in the Rock Retirement Club, we actually did a live workshop where she walked us through the steps of using the tool, the Enneagram, to understand yourself better and understand your spouse better, so we can reconnect with the drivers, the things that we naturally enjoy. That is available on demand. That's one of the big benefits of joining the Rock Retirement Club. Not only do you get great education and get to talk with people just like you that are on a similar part of the journey, but we are constantly hosting workshops with subject matter experts around how do you rock retirement. So you can check that out at rockretirementclub.com. But for now, let's go talk with Teresa. So I think step one in rediscovering and connecting with your true self as we noodle on how to create our identity in retirement is to do some self-examination and identify and put some labels to what motivates us, what drives us, what gives us pleasure. And great tools to do that are personality tests such as the DISC assessment and Myers-Briggs. We've all probably taken them in corporate life. But one in particular, the Enneagram, I think is a really powerful tool. So today we're going to talk with Teresa McCloy. In addition to being a businesswoman, she is the host of the Enneagram in Your Real Life podcast, which is a great show, a very human show about how to use this to be intentional and live a better life. So let's go talk with Teresa and explore how to use this tool to become more self-aware as our first step in our process. Hello, Teresa.
Hey, Roger. Great to be here.
When I was 12, I thought my authentic self was being a football player. I would pray every night, God, please let me be a football player. He didn't, and that's okay, because it really wasn't my authentic self. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I actually wanted to be a professional musician, specifically a vocalist.
You want to?
So that was.
You want to give me a few bars?
No, I do not.
Okay.
And I did get to live out some of that dream as I served for a while in creative arts and did some things and some theatrical things, but nobody was willing to pay me the big bucks like the professional football player, big bucks.
And that is why we're having this chat. And I've been having this conversation with clients that are on the precipice of retirement, of feeling a bit lost and a bit anxious about the ending of their identity in a way. They don't verbalize it that way, but whether they're VP of marketing or partner at the law firm, as they get within, 6 months or so, the stress level is skyrocketing and the anxiety is. And you deal a lot with personalities and helping. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think we spend the first, early 20s of our life really in that season of work mode and discovering. Our culture is set up to say, go to college to do something. Find that identity in the work that you do, find the work that you love, all of those things. So it's very much ingrained in us, at least in our culture here in the United States, to find that identity in that. And then once we find it, we live in it for 15 or 30 years, whatever it is, till retirement. So the fear, the anxiety that comes when, who will I be if I'm not that? And reconnecting to, we all know that we're important and we're somebody, and getting back to the things that we love. But we even ask the question, like, what do I love to do? What do I enjoy?
And what's interesting is, in these career paths, and it did for me, and I was able to unwind it over the last 6 years, is that the career paths, if you end up being really successful, have their own trajectory and a lot of times put you in a mode. And I think of the two people that I'm referring to, of they are top of their game at what they do. I mean, they are just awesome, but it has nothing to do with something they love.
We end up there because financially, for whatever reason, the success drive, the financial drive, whatever it is, we end up going up the next rung of the ladder, right? Like, now I need this certification, or I need this much more education. And we just keep seeking that, and we get caught up in it because it almost becomes a cycle of how would I get out of that? And there are people that step out, right? Right in the middle of the top of their game, they step out of it. But most of us then just start looking to the retirement stage. When I get to retirement, then I'll start doing the things that I love.
And then when they get close, and I'm sort of referring to these two individuals, they start realizing it's sort of like coming from like middle school to high school or high school to college. I'm at top of my game. Now I have no clue what I'm doing, and I don't know who I am and where I fit in.
That's that loss of identity, right? Of who will I be if I'm not this?
Right. I had a friend the other day tell me that he knows attorneys that 10 years after they're retired, somebody asks, who they are. Oh, I'm a retired attorney. Right. They never give up that identity. So, and that's sort of the theme of this month. And the reason I think you're important and the wisdom you have is, once we establish and acknowledge that this is happening, we sort of have to reconnect with who we are as a person, who our authentic self is. So we can noodle on creating an identity that's more congruent with our natural personality.
Right. And that's where, I work with the tool called the Enneagram. There's lots of different tools out there that, help us in this personality discovery. The thing I love about the Enneagram is it brings in a little more of the emotional side of things, which, again, here in our culture, we live a lot in the IQ space. We live a lot in our heads. And we forget about our hearts. We even forget about what our bodies are telling us. And what's interesting about the retirement years, as we move towards those, our bodies start telling us lots of things. And we're having to listen to them a little bit more. And we realize even some of the stress maybe of the work we were in affected our body, affected our health. And so we're rediscovering all three centers of intelligence. We've really lived pretty hard out of one of them. That's kind of what the Enneagram can show you. And so that discovery then of how do I really become my best authentic self, knowing maybe one of these 9 styles really resonates with me. It might help me communicate even with my spouse as we move into retirement, and some different things. Give me my security blanket back of, I now know who I am again. And it feels really good to reconnect with some of, I'm passionate. I think about you, and I know you've shared it on your podcast, this last month or so that you spent in Colorado. What brought you to the desire to do that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. What brought you to that desire?
Because adventure is a big value of me. I need new and I need adventure.
And you've discovered that adventure matters to you. So as people move through these phases, that anxiety can be lifted when they start to reconnect with, wow, adventure matters to me. So I can give up some of this identity because I've rediscovered this identity. And I know you had a blast while you were there. And
yeah, except for that one fall on the mountain bike. Except for that, it was a blast.
Yeah, that could have like ruined that day for sure.
Well, what's interesting with that example, as I think about this, is a lot of times when we're working and we're successful and it's not congruent with who we are naturally, we don't have time to think about who we are naturally, right? I think of, if we go back 5-6 years ago, and a lot of it for me to get to doing Colorado and that kind of, and we already booked the house again next year for 5 weeks. To get to the point of doing that, I had already gone through a journey of living more congruently or more fully with who I am. So as an example, prior to having the podcast, I was a partner at a wealth management firm, and I was the chief compliance officer, which is a very detailed, very structured type of profession. I was an advisor, but I had that role as well. And I was good at being a chief compliance officer. But through the Enneagram and through my journey, I've unwound all these roles that I had that I was good at, that were sucking the life out of me, which allowed me to sort of reconnect with adventure and laughter and service. And, now people probably would, they think of me on the show, they would laugh that I was the chief compliance officer. But it took going through thinking about that. And that's why I think the Enneagram is a way of doing that, but you got to come up for air first, right?
Right. And so the season of life that we're talking about, as we transition from the workspace into the retirement space, gives us that opportunity to, kind of take the pause and say, before I jump into the next thing, or before I go back to work, which we find many people, I was retired for 1.5 years and now I'm doing a whole nother career. And there's nothing wrong with doing a little bit of work and doing those things. We know that. But it gives us the opportunity to reconnect back to that authentic self. It's a season of life where space offers us a little bit of that. So I think any type of work we can do there, whether it's using the Enneagram or other things, we don't get that all the time throughout our life, right? So it's a great time to do a little deep dive and say, wow, I forgot about that part of myself. Just like you said about, and we've talked before on some other things, type 7 on the Enneagram is what Roger would claim as his kind of home space. And that is that adventure, freedom lifestyle, love to do different things, try new things, all of those things. And you've rediscovered that totally different than a compliance officer. That's for sure.
And I think of 2 ways that I've seen people reestablish their identity after retirement, not using tools. And one I think of, he was a corporate guy, this was years ago, and got laid off, got a package, and then he was in a cubicle kind of guy. And then when he got laid off, he started a sprinkler company, and it was himself in a truck. And he went around and fixed sprinklers. And I remember asking him, why do you do this? Like, I love playing in the dirt. He was having the time of his life. And he intuitively sort of knew who his authentic self was. Mm-hmm. I compare that to a gentleman I spoke with recently who retired from the high-powered corporate gig and basically volunteered in leadership positions in charitable work and realized he had sort of recreated the pressure cooker that he just left. And that's sort of like the bad way. He didn't reconnect and now he wanted out. It's like, what did I just do?
You see both scenarios play out for people, one or the other. I think the opportunity, though, in, going back to even your original thought at the beginning of, these guys that are a little bit anxious about what am I going to do, is looking at it with open hands instead of closed fists of like, this is an opportunity for me to do some self-awareness work, and just see, what do I like? What do I want to explore? Try some different things. And for some people, it's going to feel better to have a plan, even of, for a couple of months, I'm going to do this. My husband and I, we're in our late 50s. Dale just turned 60. And we've done that around travel, right? We know we want to travel, but we're just not sure how. So, do we want the RV thing, which you've talked about on the show? Do we want the timeshare thing? Do we want a second home? So we're going to spend some time exploring all of those things until we see what fits us, what's our authentic self, as we come into that different season. So that's just an example of try some things on, see see what you like.
In a couple months, that's the theme. So travel.
Oh, there we go.
So let's talk about the Enneagram and how that can help you embrace with an open hand, finding your authentic self. So you walk through, I mean, we all heard of personality tests, the DISC, Myers-Briggs, things like that. Explain how the Enneagram approaches things. And I've done it with you, and we've had sessions on myself, and I find it really helpful. But describe for someone that might not know it.
Sure. Well, the word Enneagram itself just means, Enneam means 9 and gram means drawing. So it really is just a drawing of a circle with 9 numbers around it. I love teaching the Enneagram through what I call the harmony model, which means there's 3 centers of intelligence. We've usually learned to operate very much out of one of those. So the IQ space, the EQ space, the IQ being intellectual, the EQ being emotional, and the gut space, GQ is how we refer to it.
That must be mine, GQ.
You're the GQ totally. Guy. I knew you would have to go there. We either, are coming from our head, our heart, or our body, that body gut reaction. And we even use that phrase, right? I don't know. It's just my gut reaction. And so I believe that we've really have access to all 3 centers, but we've learned to operate very authentically through one center. And then if we can learn to connect to the other 2 just a little bit more. And that's where, even as we talk about this season of life of people coming, we really have used that one center. It has served us well. When I think of you saying about a compliance officer, your harmony triad is the 7, the 4, and the 1. The 1 is about detail, perfection, and getting it right. So you were accessing a huge part of yourself, maybe to an extreme. And now you're like, wow, I'm going to go over here and live in my 7 for a while because I want adventure. I want fun. And that 4 is that creative piece. And so every harmony triad within the Enneagram has a head, a heart, and a gut. And really to be our best self, I often refer to live in our zone of genius, right? We learn to access all 3. So this season of life gives us that opportunity to reconnect with that. And if we're doing it with someone else, with a partner, then it's them rediscovering that too. And how's that going to open up the way we make decisions, the way we communicate, the things that we choose to do in travel, in how we spend our money, which becomes a big part of these decisions, right? So the Enneagram just gives us insight into becoming our best real self through these 3 centers.
And a lot of these things seem intuitively obvious, but what I think,
yes.
But I heard the phrase once, vapor to paper, and it gives it meat. And so you can self-identify not just yourself, but also your spouse. And I want to go there. But before I do, talk a little bit about, because this is one that maybe I anchor to it a little bit too much. In that in each one of these spaces, there's ways, for me on the 7, there's a way to express that in a healthy way, but there's also an unhealthy way that comes out.
Right. So within each type, I call it authentic and adaptive. And usually throughout the years, we very much can identify adaptive sides of ourselves. Like, I automatically go to anger, or I automatically go to fear, or I automatically go to shame. So those 3 kind of core motivations relate to each of the centers. The gut center automatically goes to anger. And I will say this, sarcasm is a light form of anger. So for all of us that love a good
I love sarcasm. I must be a really angry guy.
Yeah. So, it's the acceptable form, right? Because it's humorous. And, in that intellectual side of things, in that center, really, the reason I would want to gather information, the reason I would want to overthink things is at my core, there's a fear. And then in the EQ space, at my core, I'm needing approval. And so when we take anything to extreme, right, it's going to be overdone and we're going to overuse it. So I'm a type 3 on the Enneagram, which is in the EQ space. So I would overwork and overdo, which is the gift that I bring too, being effective and efficient and seeing process and systems. But if I overdo that, I'm at workaholism and I'm forgetting about relationships and I'm forgetting to even think through things. I'm just doing it. I'm just, storming down the road to the next thing. So anything is extreme And then we want to be moving more back to our authentic self. And so again, in this season of life, many people may have lived at that extreme. They may have pushed their gift, as we say, to the extreme. And it feels a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning to move back to this authentic place and pause a little bit before, they charge through whatever their gift is. So again, that's the awareness that a tool, and I love what you said about, I think you said vapor to paper. Once you pause and take some time with these types of things, they are intuitive. And you go, oh yeah, that's me. That's what I do. That's who I am. But now I have some language. And I think that's the other advantage to tools like the Enneagram is if I have some common language, either with my spouse or with my team, with my adult children, whoever that might be that I can talk about, I can give grace and empathy. And grace and empathy go a really long way in any relationships.
Oh, they're the secret to my life. I ask for them both all the time. I think of from a business standpoint. So I'm a 7. I like adventure. I love that inauthentic or adaptive, yeah, which is sort of the extreme because the paper part of it is being adventurous and being a fast starter and being creative, which are all sort of in my spaces, serve me really well with business. I start things very quickly. I'm really into starting new things. And as Nicole will tell me, and she is like, at times I'll call her the gutter bumpers of my life to keep me, because the authentic is good. The adaptive is I'm all over the place.
Impulsive.
Right. And I can get myself into trouble that way. And what I've liked by bringing it to paper is the awareness. Oh, I'm doing this too much. This is how I should be doing this. So, sorry, you said the one is sort of a control space. Well, there's being really detail oriented expressed poorly is being a jerk.
It's the shoulds and the oughts and we didn't do it right and all of those things. But in its authentic place, the one brings goodness. It brings a way and a system and a process of doing things. So when you take your adventure with a little bit of systems and process and a little bit of that for creativity, now you're flowing. The term that I use is full circle, right? You're checking in with everybody. It's like, what's my heart saying about that? What's my gut saying about that? What's the system and process I need to put into place to keep my gutter bumpers in? And then what is the imaginative side that's really my gift of who you bring? We're talking about your 741, but each of the harmonies have that same flow to them. And they're all positive, authentic, and then they all have their extreme adaptive.
Now let's go to spouses. When we're dealing with all of this identity crisis, either you and your spouse are dealing with both because you're both retiring a lot of times at the same time, or one stays home and you live together, but you're not together. And then when you retire both at the same time, you're together all the time. And that is a pressure point from divorce statistics, right? And I imagine it's normal that I think this way, so everybody else thinks this way too. How does this help when you have couples?
Well, I think too, what you just said is important. I think this way, so everybody else should too. And many people that are coming from their work environment, they were using that gift of, I think this way. This is the gift that I bring. I got hired into this position because, I was a leader or I was a researcher. Type 5 on the Enneagram loves to research, loves to be in the details, loves to have all the ideas. And maybe you were hired to be that guy, but then you come home, right? And you're with your spouse all the time and they really don't need all the ideas and all the research and all the stuff that you're bringing. You even think about, planning your retirement and looking at the numbers. They don't want to look at the numbers, but that's where you lived. So,
the extreme of that, Teresa, is I think of a military officer coming home from combat where they are leaders and what they say goes and they're the alpha and they will be followed. And I've seen this with friends and they come home to their wife and kids, but they're still in that zone. That's like an extreme that I think I've seen people struggle with.
Right. And so we're bringing these two personalities home, as you said, all the time. My husband and I are a little bit different in that because we both work from home. We have learned that we can't spend all our time together. We have to kind of function more in that place of having our own separate spaces and having our things because we know our personalities well. I am more of the forward moving energy on the Enneagram and a 3, and he is a quieter energy of a 9. And so I can't be, dictating to him the 20 things we need to get done today all day long that I see here, there, and yonder. And he's going to get them done, but it's going to be in a different way than me. But now that we're aware of that, we can give each other that grace and empathy to be who we are, to be our authentic self, and the space to live in our best places, to know how to communicate with him differently. I know that a chalkboard list works better than my voice telling him. I mean, it's the little things, right?
Yeah.
That we figure out about each other and our authentic selves.
This is important stuff in this journey towards retirement. And you have an awesome podcast, The Enneagram in Your Real Life, where you talk about these things. You just finished up a workshop that's now on demand in the Rock Retirement Club.
I did. It was so much fun.
Everybody should check out your podcast for sure, because this is an important thing, figuring out our new identities. Any last words from you?
No, thanks so much for opening the conversation. It's a continued conversation, as you said. The journey is never ending. It's fun.
I'm dancing, but you're not saying
You're dancing with Happy Lab. Nicole, I'm watching her dance as we start the Happy Lab. Hey, Nicole.
Hello.
So, Nicole, I have a lot of very high stakes friends.
High stakes friends?
High stakes friends. The way I describe it are those are the people that you can call at 3 a.m. and they will answer the phone and help you.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Well, that's good. That's a good thing to have.
That's a really good thing to have. I won't call you at 3 a.m., but you are on that list, you and Clay. So just FYI.
Okay.
So,
well, I mean, I would be there. I don't know what will be happening at 3 a.m., but
nothing good. Nothing good. But as one of my high stakes friends, you shared something with me that I'm going to go to this weekend with my son, this new shop. It's called, what is it called? Game Theory?
Yes, Game Theory.
It's like a combination of a eatery bar, and they have 500 games, and you go and you can just play games. And I've been wanting something like this to develop some more, well, they start off as low stakes friends, right? Just people to hang out with and enjoy a common interest. So I'm really excited about that. We always talk about building relationships. So where would be some of your low stakes friendships? Do you know the barista's name?
I feel like I'm at the point, like with my kids and their activities and stuff, where I have, the low stakes, like other sports parents and other parents from the school, that kind of stuff.
In church, to an extent, are you nice?
Church, yes. I see the same people on Sundays.
Are you nice to them? Be nice to them, because that's how you develop them.
Of course I'm nice to them. No, I go and I frown and I'm like, ugh, church.
It's just your spirit. That's just your spirit. All right, let's go set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
In the next 7 days, we're going to set a little baby step towards living a happier life and retirement, rocking life and retirement.
That's good enough. That's good.
Perfect. Okay.
Everybody gets it. We're just trying to set some little sprints we can do to be intentional. So in the next 7 days, why don't you go check out Teresa's podcast, The Enneagram in Your Real Life, and then go to her website if you're interested in taking the Enneagram. And she actually has a package where she'll talk through it and work through it with you, so you can start to do some self-discovery. Hey, Nicole.
Hey, Roger.
Hey, listener. Do you know what's coming up next month?
Ooh, I know.
You want to tell them?
Yes, I do. We are going to do another retirement plan live.
Yes, a live retirement case study where we talk with a listener like you, and they're stepping up to the plate here to share their story. And we're going to work through a simplified planning process, and you get to listen every step of the way of myself talking with them and helping frame what the issues are so we can figure out whether they can retire or not.
Can you give us a little spoiler about what's going to be different, this case study from the past ones?
Well, this one is going to be difficult. We've done what? We've done people with pensions, people with no pensions.
People with very low expenses.
Very low expenses. That one blew people.
A single person, right? We did a single person last year.
And what we're doing this time is we're talking with Emma, and her husband, Luca, have been dealt sort of a bad hand right before retirement, where Luca has a real major medical problem that has sort of derailed a lot of the original plans and is causing a lot of rejiggering of how they're going to do it all and what it's going to look like. So we all get dealt those, right? Some much worse than others. So it's going to be difficult. But she's got a great spirit, and we're going to dive into it, and maybe you'll have some ideas to maybe help her rock retirement, her and Luca. So check it out all next month on the show. I hope you have a great day.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.